We have a simple bar attachment, so we just drop the presser foot down and into place, and there is gap between the foot and the plastic guide, so we can thread our thread through, and that isn't going to cause us any issues. And then what we need to do is, with our bias binding, fold it so the final edge is towards the throat of the machine and the two folded edges are towards the outside of the sewing machine, because they're going to be threaded through here. Now, all being well, this will be fairly straightforward. If not, there are some other tricks we can use, and there it is, threaded through. It can be that simple, and it doesn't have to be more complicated. The first thing we need to do is make sure that the needle lines up with the edge of the binding. And now that we've got it inserted, what we're going to do is use this this control knob or screw to position the binding in relation to the needle. So you loosen it up, and then you can move it quite significantly left and right. And what you need to do is just get it so that it is where you want those stitches to be, how close to the edge you want those stitches. And and the tricky part is, when you actually tighten this knob up, or tighten this screw up, you'll find that the plastic moves. So this is the hardest part, ironically, is setting that width, because it continues to move. I'm trying to do this without blocking the view for you, which isn't necessarily very easy. So you hold it steady and then tighten the screw, but you need to make sure that you're not twisting it away, otherwise that screw just won't hold the position that you're after. So, and always make sure that you test it, which might seem a bit heavy-handed, but make sure that you try and move that afterwards, because, as I say, that screw can be a bit tricky sometimes. So once it's all aligned and you've used the screw head to get the position that you're looking for, drop it down manually just to double check everything's okay, and then we can start to sew on through. I tend to hold the binding up so that we can see that it is following this line in to the foot. And once we've started sewing, you can double check that the stitches are as you want them, and that's how you make a tag. Now, if you are then looking to put your binding around some fabric, what we need to do is then feed the fabric into the machine. So that's what this central slot is for here. So once you've got your binding in place, you can then insert the fabric. With a curve, I tend to just position the fabric with the binding in place before I get to the foot. So we'll just pop a couple of pins in to hold that in place, and then we'll gently feed it as the time comes when we get nearer the foot. Not necessarily so important to do that if you are working on a straight edge, but where we're curving, both an outer curve and then a gentle inner curve, I find it best to just pin that in place before we start, so that we're not worrying too much about that at the end. And then one final pin down here, and we're good to go. So if you have difficulty inserting the fabric, and sometimes you could just use some spray starch to insert the fabric, but if the fabric is very light, then just don't insert it. Simply start and then feed it in as the rest of the fabric comes through. Make sure you put the presser foot down. And as you come here, this should be feeding through the centre portion. You can remove the pin, use it to hold that before you get to the foot. Obviously it cannot feed through the foot in any way. And remember, we must remove those pins or else they'll not feed through. And as you can see, this is now starting to adhere quite nicely to the fabric, and it's neat on both the front and the reverse. And then we just follow on round the curve. Again, remember to hold it. I find it much easier to feed everything through if I hold it up at a slight angle. And when you finish, a slight reverse stitch just to hold everything in place. Make sure the needle is raised. Nip.